Welcome to Canadian Justice. I'm Christine Van Geyn, and today we're discussing a new proposed law that's been introduced by the federal Mark Carney government, Bill C-8, an act respecting cybersecurity. This is a reboot of a Trudeau-era bill, C-26, and it has some civil liberties experts concerned that it could lead to violations of privacy rights and lead to increased state surveillance. The bill has two main components. First, amendments to the Telecommunications Act that give the federal government broader powers over telecom service providers, including the power to order a service provider to stop using or remove a product or service. And second, it creates new obligations on what the act refers to as critical service systems providers, and this includes sectors like banking, telecom, energy, and transportation. The bill would also give regulators enhanced powers to verify compliance, along with the power to impose very high penalties for some offenses, up to $15 million per day. The scope of the new bill has experts concerned, and here today to discuss some of those concerns are Matt Hatfield from Open Media and Tamir Israel from the Canadian Civil Liberties Association. Thank you both so much for joining me today. Matt, I'll start with you. I think there are a lot of specifics we can get into about what the government might be able to hypothetically do with some of these new powers, but I think at its core, the biggest concern around C-8 is that it gives very broad and discretionary power to cabinet, to certain cabinet ministers in particular. What do you want us to know about why that should make people worry?
Yeah, so this is a bit of a concerning trend we've seen with a lot of legislation in recent years, and it's setting up legislation as sort of empty shells where a broad set of powers is awarded to government, and then we're told that protections and safeguards and necessary guidance will be provided in regulation rather than in the law. I think from the perspective of government, this is desirable because they think it'll give them more flexibility, they can adjust as they go along. But of course, from a protection of our rights and liberties perspective, that's a very concerning situation. It means that you don't have actual protections. You have sort of discretionary ones that the government chooses to award you in regulation and can withdraw in the future. And so on this bill and many others, we're looking for more safeguards and protections built into the law.
So one of the components of this bill, Tamir, is the power to order a service provider to stop using or remove a product or service. And I think when people hear language like that, they just don't know what it means and how it might affect their life. So maybe you could give us an example of what that might actually look like in practice.
Yeah, so there is actually a very concrete use case envisioned for this part of the bill, and it was actually brought into effect. I mean, we could really call it the Huawei provision because it was brought into effect to order telecommunication companies in Canada to remove equipment by a particular vendor, Huawei, a Chinese-based company, from their networks. And again, in practice, what this would look like is that maybe a little bit gradually, companies would replace any equipment that they have from this particular vendor, which is mostly going to be mobile cellular signals, so like 4G and 5G equipment from their networks, and replace it with something else. It sounds pretty basic, and this part of the bill is not necessarily the most controversial, but even here, there are some issues with it. For example, the cost of this, we have competition issues in Canada in the telecommunications sector, and the cost of this might not be borne evenly by different service providers. And then there's also Huawei is kind of the primary use case envisioned by this part of the bill when it's being brought into effect. But there's also a risk, with this framework that, and I should just say that the concern with Huawei very basically is there's a lot of overlapping rationales, but the main concern is that because it's a Chinese-based company, the Chinese government can secretly order Huawei to make its networks more amenable to foreign spying on people in Canada. Now, whether that's the theoretical kind of argument for removing this. And there is a bit, of course, of irony here because the government's solution to this concern is that, we have a bill that will, as we'll hear, allows it to issue its own secret orders that could also introduce backdoors. But even with this framework here, where there could be a legitimate objective, what you want more than really briefly, more than a high level, like a high level ability to make these orders is a rigorous framework where the vendor being impacted gets notice that their product is being banned and has a chance to kind of address the underlying rationales for it.
We've got to go to break, but we will be right back.